A public inquiry into the contaminated blood scandal, described as the worst ever NHS treatment disaster, begins this week. It's going to look at how NHS patients came to be given infective blood products during the 1970s and 1980s.
The inquiry is due to start tomorrow. It'll be led by Sir Brian Langstaff. It's expected to last 2 years, and it has been long fought for. The Mayor of Manchester, former Health Secretary Andy Burnham, pushed for it, saying the scandal had been a criminal cover-up on an industrial scale.
Theresa May announced the inquiry in the Commons in July 2017.
The victims and their families have suffered pain and hardship, and they deserve answers, and the inquiry will give them those answers so they will know why this happened, how it happened. This was an appalling tragedy and it should never have happened.
Thousands of people with haemophilia and other bleeding disorders were infected with HIV and hepatitis viruses over a period of more than 20 years. About 2,500 of them have since died.
Well, they were injected with blood products to help with clotting disorders, but because the UK was struggling to keep up with demand for the treatment, it had begun to import supplies from the US, and some of this imported blood came from high-risk sources, people with chaotic lives, including from prison inmates, and people were being paid for their blood as well. It's thought as many as 30,000 people may have been infected. Ade Goodyear has haemophilia and has been infected with HIV and hepatitis B and C, joins us from his home in Hampshire. Good morning, Ade.
Good morning, Nicky. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, the story is just chilling. Take us back. Tell us about your school, the boarding school you were at.
I attended Treloar School because basically my home life schooling didn't work out at all. Because of the nature of haemophilia, it was decided to send me there at the age of 9 years old because I missed so much school. It was an incredible school, to be quite honest. There was nurses, doctors, physios, treatment on demand, which we'd never had before. There was an abundance of factor VIII at the school. So it was really rather incredible. It was a new dawn for all of us that attended.
And factor VIII is the clotting agent, this revolutionary clotting agent that everybody was so excited about at the time, which has caused so many of these deaths. So at the time, you bled, no need to panic, it was fixed, yeah?
That's right. I mean, usually, say at home, it would take a week to get over one bleed, so you'd be in hospital for the week. There, you could have your factor VIII. You'd still bleed, but things calmed down. It was better for us, and we've got an education. Something that, say, my other brothers, that unfortunately both passed away from contaminated blood, didn't really receive. So yes, it was really rather remarkable. I actually got GCSEs, which is incredible to me today. But yes, it became so tainted and so tarnished rather quickly too, which is an absolute tragedy, what we've all been through. You know.
How many other haemophiliacs were at the school at the same time as you?
30 to 35, most of which are now dead, have now passed away from their infections and not from their haemophilia. Which is so hard to get your head round, and I really, like most, have a lifeboat syndrome about that I'm still here, which is incredible, like many. We've now lost 73 ex-students from the Treloar School, which is just an incredible number of people. I stopped counting at 40, and so did my other friends and colleagues in the school.
And tell me about your brothers.
Likewise, they didn't attend Treloar. My brother Jason very nearly did, but there was a funding issue. And likewise, they got contaminated and infected in Margate. And Jason died of AIDS in 1997, aged 28, very frightened, very scared. And Gary, my other brother, died in 2015, just before Christmas, from hepatitis C. They were, like many, so angry about it. They don't understand why the American plasma was imported in full knowledge there was a risk from HIV. And that's something that they took to their graves, to be honest, like many people around this country. There's too many empty chairs around too many tables, and we need answers as to why that happened.
And is it right that you were getting kind of big goodie bags and gifts from the pharmaceutical company?
Yes. Well, there was an incentive system, really, where the American farmers, certain pharmaceutical companies would give backpacks, watches, clocks. Stationery was a big one. We had filofaxes, especially with that being the 80s. That was the practice that only lasted about 3 years, though. When HIV was more known about in 1983-4, that things were not right with the factor VIII, especially the American products, the director at the Treloar Centre actually put a stop to that fairly rapidly. But prior to that, yeah, there was...
Why were they giving you those? You say as a kind of incentive?
An incentive regarding for treatment. So there we were learning how to home treat and administer our factor VIII at home. So we'd be given, say, a backpack, or if we did our treatment properly, or we learned something new about how to treat haemophilia. And it became a sort of an innocent, fun competition, really, between us boys to try and get the latest thing, whether that be a watch. I remember there was one pharmaceutical company that had a small box of chronograph watches, which were quite expensive, as you can imagine. Shiny, and there was a bit of competition to get that watch. And I was one of the lucky recipients of such an item. But I must stress that as soon as the HIV became more known about it in the products, that was put a stop to fairly sharpish.
Did you ever feel at any stage that you were being experimented on?
Yes. We now know, I mean, this is obviously for Sir Brian and his team to uncover, but we now know that there was indeed non-consensual testing at the school, at the NHS-funded centre. So we've seen evidence of that, and hence the reason for why the public inquiry is so now important to all us and our families and friends.
And the health minister at the time when this was going on, over some of the period, Ken Clarke, said at one stage there's no evidence that blood contamination leads to HIV. Now, whatever you say about that, there was a lot of ignorance at the time, but also there were, and there is evidence of this, isn't there, without mentioning any names, people within the health authorities, the administration of and the scientific community who did know.
They did, yeah. There was a circular in 1981 that went to all haemophilia centre directors warning of the risks of HDLV3 maybe in the blood supply in America. Our doctors were fully aware of that at the time, and so was the Department of Health. We will never understand why they just continued, Nicky. That's a question that goes round and round my head twice a day, every day at least. Why did they continue to import American products, and also the British products weren't very safe, they were full of hepatitis, and just continue? We need that uncovered as to why, say in my case, I was infected five times with 5 different pathogens by the time I was 15. You know, that's very difficult to understand when you're just a child. They were adult decisions placed on children's shoulders, and it should never have been like that. They should have slowed the flow of factor VIII, really. There was a thing called prophylaxis where you take factor VIII for regular bleeds, and they knew the risks full well. Why didn't they slow the flow of factor VIII in those days in full knowledge of those risks?
Tell me about the day on which you were told that you were HIV positive.
Well, this is a bit of a mixed bag. Anyone below the age of 16, we were taken into an office, the doctor's office at Treloar's, and the doctor there explained to us that we may have heard, and we had heard, of course, that the factor VIII wasn't as safe as they'd hoped. And they talked about hepatitis viruses, other things like CMV and other risks in the product. And slowly but surely they led to it. It was a 20-minute chat, and towards the end of the chat they went around the room one by one saying with emotion, you have, you haven't, you have, you haven't, you have. And that was the 5 of us in that room on that day. In addition to that, I'm the last remaining survivor from that room. The others were all gone. Yeah. So it was quite a shock, because you can imagine the falling tombstones and all the media was full of AIDS on the front page. We'd read a thing in 1983 in one of the national newspapers, Killer Blood headline. We were already frightened. There was already conversations taking place that do we have this thing? Has this happened to us? And we didn't know until the test came out.
And how old were you?
I was 15 then at the time. But I was infected when I was 12.
Did they tell you how long you might have to live when you were in that room?
They obviously they tried to sort of stretch that out, but in that time the prognosis was 2 to 3 years to live.
Did they say that at the time?
Yes, yeah, because that was actually what was happening across the HIV
So you're
community.
15 years old and you're in that room and they've told you you've got you're HIV positive and you say you may have 2 years to live. They said that to you?
2 to 3, yeah. But we will do all we can to keep you running. You know, yeah, you're over. And the responses afterwards were obviously, I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I'm looking through the blinds and the sunshine was coming into the blinds, and it's how many more sunrises will I see? Another friend of mine reacted very badly when I got at the office. He went down to the horticulture department and smashed 2 pots against the windows, saying, "We're all dead, we're all dead." And after that, everything was a bonus, really. We just tried to live as best as we could with the time that we had.
And your parents, what did they say about this when you contacted them?
This is the one, again, this is something I would never, none of us Treloar boys, and around the country also, will ever understand. Nobody lifted a phone, Nicky. Nobody spoke to our parents. It was really up to us to tell our parents, which I would never understand why. We were children, and our doctors at Treloar, who were excellent, by the way, in the main, they did a lot of great work too, but they never lifted a phone to our parents. And over the last sort of 10 years, the amount of lads that I've spoken to, because there's only 16 of us left now, that's the one constant. No one lifted a telephone to say what's going to happen to us, what the treatment protocols were.
Did you have to lift the telephone?
Yes. Yeah, I actually had to have a conversation with my mum because the Treloar College the Treloar Haemophiliac Centre didn't tell them.
What did you say to her?
Well, it was very difficult because there's a lot of teenage angst. And mum didn't believe it, really. She said, doctors don't kill, they don't maim, they take care of you. So that was very difficult. It was very difficult for support, really, to find any, because it was such an impossible situation. We were going to die from our treatment. Dying from haemophilia was always a risk. Yes, that was always in the ether. We knew that from being born with it. But dying because of the treatment for it, never. And that's something that she can never understand, and nor us.
Are your parents still around?
No, they passed away now. They've moved on, you know. But Mum never understood it. Jason and Gary died very scared. Jason more. All the Treloar lads. We tried so much to support each other.
Jason and Gary, towards the end, were you able to have conversations with them?
Not so much with Gary, because he sort of did his own thing. But Jason, yeah, I was there with Jason right until the end, on the very day that he died. And I was the one that had to tell him that he only had a few days left to live. And I will never forget looking into his big, amazingly blue ocean eyes and watch the fear wash over his face. And it's something I can never trade or understand why that had to happen to him. He was an extremely happy, positive person. Both Gary and Jason were, as were many of our Treloar lads and friends. But that's something I'll never forget. And I would like answers to know why that happened.
And just finally, what's your life like at the moment in terms of medication, how you live it? Because those with suffering who are HIV positive now, it's very different from how it was then. The stigma has gone largely.
Even
go on.
regarding stigma of putting it out there, it's very worrying because that stigma is ingrained into all of us especially from the 80s.
I think so, yeah.
But regarding how things are now, I take medications every day for HIV. I'm so fortunate, so fortunate, better. I've been able to clear the hepatitis C virus. Well, it's been suppressed with treatments, and also Hep B as well. That's all under control. So thankfully, I'm okay, Nicky. I'm okay. I do suffer with a terrible peripheral neuropathy, which is damaged because of the long-term medications, and that creates a lot of pain in my hands and feet. In fact, it's not very good this morning. And there have been many other side effects through the years, but like anything, we don't know any different. You just get through them. You take your medications and you get through things. You have to have that driving force. And that driving force was something Treloar gave us. It instilled that into us, that we would hopefully live as long as we could. When we left that school, we were hoping to go on to employment and life and home treatment, and Factor VIII was going to be this panacea, really, this amazing thing, but for us it was a death sentence. And we need to know why that death sentence continued for so long, when they could have helped us out so much earlier by sowing the flow of Factor VIII and 9 into this country.
And your hopes for the inquiry?
So Brian and his team have a chance to drop an anchor in an ocean to calm our waters, to get to the truth. I mean, as I'm not sure if you're aware, but so many documents have been destroyed over the years, the last 30 years, really key documents, ministerial papers. That's one of my concerns, that so much is missing.
Deliberately, do you believe?
Well, I think it's very good probably to quote Lord Owen, that even his ministerial papers, all bar one memo, were shredded. I mean, yes, I do believe there has been a long, drawn-out cover-up so we don't get to the truth. Because human beings are very good at many things, and telling untruths is one of them. And we've got evidence of so many cover-ups now, and issues regarding who knew what, when, and why.
Well, Lord Owen, Secretary of State for Health, at one time, he's one of the politicians that comes out of this rather better.
Oh, absolutely. He did try to go for self-sufficiency, as we know, in 1976. He was right up there because he knew about the paid donor system in America, and but that just wasn't implemented. He left office, and the money that he set aside it wasn't implemented, and leaving us exposed to multiple viruses. It's quite important to note in that time frame at Treloar School that on the introduction of Factor VIII concentrate in 1975/76, the director of haemophilia there said at the time to one of the nurses that this Factor VIII and 9 is going to revolutionise their lives, but it's equally going to kill them. And they were his words. And the nurse asked as to why, said, because it's full of hepatitis. And that was on the very first introduction of Factor VIII into the Treloar Haemophilia Centre.
Well, we got a couple of texts. We got many texts coming in. Just quickly, I'd like to tell you about a couple of them. Rachel, you've got them in front of you.
The story about Factor VIII, one of the saddest stories I've ever heard. I'm speechless. Something has to be done, said Mary from Secklescombe. Another one here. This bloke has devastated me. The most moving talk I've ever heard on the radio. Another one here. Tell your amazing guest to try and forget about stigma. I would be proud to call him my mate. Would love to go for a pint with him. And won't forget his story or incredible bravery. Him, his mates and his family deserve so much better. I am in awe of him, says Michael.
At the beginning, you thanked us for having you on. We should be thanking you. Everybody should be thanking you for speaking up, Ade. You're amazing, and thank you so much for this morning, and I wish you well.
Thank you to you and your listeners. That's lifted me for the day. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you. Ade Goodyear. NHS blood and transplant spokesman said, we've been asked to be a core participant in the inquiry to ensure we are completely transparent. We will work closely with the inquiry team to ensure they have access to all the information they need to ensure the inquiry can provide truth and closure to those who have been so tragically affected by this issue. Our sympathies are with those who have been infected and their loved ones.